Wow. You know what I just realized? I just realized that we have not been recording any of this.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh my
So,
God.
if you don't mind, I'm going to start back over real quick at the top, and whatever we get done is fine. But thank you for attending. It was totally on my part. I just turned the recording on. So, Brian D. from Southeast Florida. And I'll just continue the questions. I won't try to go back. But can you
Okay.
share? Okay, we talked about a specific moment of experience that tested your self love and sobriety. You gave me that. Uh, can you expound a little bit on that specific?
Sure. I worked for about 5 years. I've been selling technology most of my life. I wasted my time on the BA and MA in history when I was in my wild and misspent youth. I was going to get a PhD, but I discovered all my friends with PhDs were unemployed.
Mm,
So I went into the business world and never looked back. And I had a detour. By accident, I got into doing talk radio, and I was doing it out in Phoenix and Tucson. I had a job there in Phoenix as a radio talk show host and executive producer for about 4 years, and I really loved it. I often used to say that uh, doing talk radio was the most fun you could have with your pants on,
wow.
and I just absolutely loved it. And they had a format change, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I got laid off,
Mm,
and I had to sit out a no compete for 3 months before I could go to another station. That's
okay.
part of the contract typically. And I was shattered by it, very frankly. But I used it as an opportunity. I had procrastinated and procrastinated about doing my 4 step. I
Mm,
was about 4 years in the program and I hadn't done it yet. I was doing the AA waltz 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3,
yeah.
1, 2, 3. And I wasn't really sober. I was dry. It's a miracle that I didn't pick up a drink, but I didn't. It was very fortunate. And finally, I had time because I'd been something of a workaholic too. I worked 60 or 70 hours a week, even though I didn't actually have to. I could have gotten by with 50 or so.
Hmm.
And I got down and got to went to my computer. This was a long time ago. This is in the 80s. I had one of the earliest PCs. And I sat there for several days filling out this 121 question questionnaire from one of the local spin drives that my sponsor had given me because I'm much too complicated for the 3 columns as it shows in the book. Uh, I just couldn't relate to that. So it took me several days to do it, and it wasn't fun. You have to relive all the rotten things you've done to people who love you, people who relied on you, all the places you've been deficient, all the places you've let people down. And I had to
Yes.
relive the whole thing. And I didn't enjoy it. But once I did it, and then I did a 5th step with my sponsor in that very same evening at 6 and 7. And I
Mm,
became a part of the program. I'd been orbiting the program before that, not really part of it. When I finally did that 6 and 7 step after the 4th and 5th, I became an integral part of AA, and AA became an integral part of me.
absolutely. The fourth step talks about made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And that's when you were talking about, and it goes on to say that a business that doesn't take inventory can hardly be a success. And so it's the same with the alcoholic that doesn't take a personal inventory. And then the fifth step, as you mentioned, sharing it with another individual and a power greater than ourselves. So I appreciate that. This thing, I wouldn't have never looked at this. I never would have done any of this work, but I knew I was up against the ropes. I couldn't fix it. I'm a master electrician by trade, and I just couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix me. I couldn't fix the situation. The harder I tried not to go drink, the more I went and drank for some reason. So until I took the 12 steps and done some work with a sponsor, then my life started changing. Let's see. Can you share? Yeah. Can you share? You just did that, and in what ways was your childhood trauma, if any, played a role in your recovery and self journey? Don't divulge anything that you like. If there was some self trauma and you can share something about it, by all means, share with us. If not, we'll skip.
Sure, no, I had actually had rather a traumatic childhood. I didn't have any physical abuse or anything, but it was primarily my father. My father was one of these nasty, angry, more Catholic than the Pope Irish pricks, and that was his good points. And nothing I did was ever satisfactory.
Yeah.
I could come home with straight A's, but one B, and they'd they'd harp on the B that I wasn't doing well enough, that I really wasn't any good. And when I did something very, very well, it was just accepted as if that's what was expected of me.
Wow.
And it was emotional abuse, and I got heavy duty emotional abuse for years. My brother got it too. We discussed it, he and I. And it took me a long time to get over that when I got into the program. And I finally realized that probably my father, when the way he was, went back 50 generations in Northern Ireland.
Mm.
And there were probably 50 generations of my family who were nasty, angry, more Catholic than the Pope Irish pricks.
Wow.
And I had to realize that and realize that he had done the best he could with what he had. And it took a great load off of me.
Absolutely. That's one of the great freedoms of Alcoholics Anonymous is once I realized that they did the best they could do. I had a sponsor that used to tell me, Wendell, why is it that when you owe somebody $1, you're beating their door down. You're kind of like, give me my damn dollar. But when when you owe them $1, you're like, man, it's only $1. Why are you messing with me? So that puts it all in perspective for me. So I appreciate it. How do you prioritize self-care and self-love in your daily life as someone in long-term recovery?
Uh, I take care of things as they come up. And
Absolutely.
I realize I take a look at issues that I'm dealing with and what is the most important one and deal with that first. What's the most difficult one and
Yes.
deal with that first. What I used to do was the really difficult ones I put off forever because I didn't want to deal with them. And
Uh,
so they got worse and worse and worse and worse, kind of like paying your bills and having the power company turn off your electricity. I had that experience, and that was enormous fun.
mm,
I complained to my sponsor about it, and he said, "Well, you got to pay your bills. You got to every month plan to pay your bills." And I said, "But you're not supposed to plan things in the program, Dan." And he said, "No, no, 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 shit for brains." That was his little nickname for me. You don't plan. You have to, obviously you have to plan things in your life. You have to plan to pay your bills, what's required of you, but you don't plan results.
yes,
And I learned that, and I took that lesson to heart.
absolutely. Another fascinating story of mine. We used to go fishing. Now, I'd been out drinking and drugging for probably years or months at least. And so I wanted to go home. If we would get up and go fishing at 3 a.m. in the morning, I'd have to leave the house at 3 a.m., get there for 6. We'd do some fishing, but he would always catch fish and I wouldn't. I said, man, why are you always catching fish? And he said, man, you're going fishing. You're going catching and I'm going fishing. I was like, what are you talking about? He says, your job is to put the bait on the hook and put it in the water. It's God's job to put a fish on the hook when he thinks you're ready. You don't do that. You come down here thinking you just spent this money and going fishing and all of that. You expect to catch fish. And he told me
Well,
that was the difference.
funny you're talking about fishing. I regarded fishing as an excellent opportunity to drink a great deal of beer.
Absolutely.
And you'd be out in the boat and you drink a case of beer in the course of the day, and then you get back to the dock and you start some serious drinking.
Absolutely. Fortunately, we was in recovery and we did not have any drinking going on. But I spent many days on the beach or on the lake drinking and trying to catch a fish. I went catching all the time. What advice would you give to others who are struggling with maintaining their sobriety while practicing self-love?
Basically, it boils down to one phrase: acceptance without approval. You have to learn to accept the things that come at you in life and deal with them in order of priority, but deal with the most difficult ones first, as I said. Uh, but you just have to accept it. I had to learn very early on in the program that I had to step down from my job as chief executive officer of the universe. And it was a big load off me when I was no longer responsible for absolutely everything in the world.
As
I discovered that I can barely take care of myself. So I tell people, take it easy. You take care of yourself. And the other thing is they'll take care of themselves as long as you do what you're required to do.
Absolutely. As we say in some of our rooms that I go to, they say, come down off the cross, Jesus needs the wood.
Right. Right.
Wow. How has the concept of forgiveness, as you had talked about earlier, both on oneself and others, instrumental in your journey of self love and recovery?
Well, one of the things I learned early on in the 12-step program was people are going to be people.
Mm,
People are fallible. People have foibles, people have difficulties, people have problems, and sometimes they're nasty, sometimes they're unreliable, and that's just dealing with people.
Mm.
And I had to come to the realization that I have to accept what they do. Acceptance really is, I mean, if you put the word acceptance across my forehead, it would be in the right place.
Wow. There's a story in the book that we're referencing that talks about acceptance is the key to all my problems. Whenever something is out of place or whatever, is something wrong with me. And a lot of people, including myself, have trouble with that. It's kind of like, how can I just accept that that guy just slapped the crap out of me, you know? And I don't think it goes to to that depth. But yes, I have to accept the things outside of my realm of being able to capable, you know, to do anything with. I often say,
And forgiving my parents for my upbringing, because like I say, I mentioned my father was an SOB.
hmm
My mother was an adult child of an alcoholic, so she was a piece at any price.
yeah,
So she let him get away with it.
yeah,
And my brother and I got emotionally abused big time. We were very, very, very ill emotionally
yeah,
and have had to deal with it over the years. But the program has been an enormous help in realizing that people are going to be people is really the start of it.
absolutely. I forgot what I was going to say, so I was just on. But anyway, my dad was an alcoholic, and I saw him in Akron, Ohio, in St. Thomas Hospital. And at that time, I swore I would never be like him, and I ended up directly like him. So,
Well,
knowledge.
my
Go ahead.
guy actually, I liked him better when he had a couple drinks in him. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he got actually nicer when he'd had a few.
Right. So when I got around him and his buddies and they was drinking, it's like, oh, that's my boy. But at home, I was a worthless piece of
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
So
boy, can I relate to that?
yes, I understand for sure. What does the phrase "you love you" mean to you in the context of your sobriety and self-love journey?
Okay. There is a philosopher, a novelist and philosopher by the name of Ayn Rand, and I'm something of a devotee of her. She wrote quite a number of books. One of them is called The Virtue of Selfishness.
Mm,
And what she means by that is the virtue of taking care of your own problems in your own way on your own time. And otherwise, you're useless to others. And so, as I mentioned before, when I got in the program, uh, I had to quit worrying about everybody else. I'm here for myself. I'm talking to you today because this helps me stay sober. And
absolutely.
that was the case with Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. When Bill Wilson was in Akron, Ohio in 1935 and terrified that he was going to go pick up a drink in the hotel bar in the Mayflower, and he got a hold of Dr. Bob after much searching and went out to talk to Dr. Bob. Now, when he went to talk to Dr. Bob, he was there to help himself.
Mm,
But what the beautiful byproduct of that, the glorious byproduct is they say you have to give it away in order to keep it. And he discovered that helped Dr. Bob enormously, and then they discovered the two of them could help other people. But first of all, you take care of your own self and your own problems.
absolutely. So, if you don't mind, I'd go off and I'd like to ask you a little bit about spirituality. You know, for me, religion and spirituality, I thought was one and the same when I came into the program. But my religious beliefs held me back for the longest because when the book or the reading said God, I went right back to my old knowledge instead of taking some of the 12 steps information and applying a spiritual application to my problems of drinking. So expound a little bit on spirituality, please.
Okay. Well, I mentioned I grew up Irish Catholic, and I had Irish nuns in school. And and then what I was told at home is anything systematic chalkboard gives you at home, you're going to get, or gives you at school, you're going to get twice as much at home.
Wow.
And we had these Irish nuns who, when you did some infraction, talking in class or something horrible like that, they'd have to come up to the front of the room and say, hold out your hands," and then wham, 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 wham. But I let's see. No, wait a minute. I've lost track of where I was. What was the question again?
Spirituality, just
Oh
expound a
yeah.
little bit on spirituality.
Oh yeah. Now I am a spiritual person. I'm not a religious believer. I'm an agnostic,
Okay.
and I've known lots of agnostics, atheists, and free thinkers in the program with long-term great sobriety, many years. Uh, Among the very first 100, in Brooklyn, New York, when they were just starting the program, there were two guys who were non-believers.
Mm,
And if you notice in the steps, every time twice it mentions God, and right after it, it's either italicized or underlined. It says, "As we understood him,"
mm,
and
yes.
they insisted on that. And I have no idea what whether there is or is not a God, whether there is or is not an afterlife. But I do know that I can spiritually connect with other people in the program. And so that's the AA basically is my spirituality.
Awesome. I often talk about my journey with spirituality and all my religious beliefs. And I was a deacon in church twice, thinking it was going to make me a better man and a better husband, and I was going to stop drinking. And I ended up meeting a deacon, and we both drank more than what I could ever drink by myself. So the other thing is, I was introduced to a guy named Michael Beckwith online, and he talks about an acorn and an oak tree and everything. The universe, God, someone created the oak tree from an acorn, and he put everything in an acorn that it needs to be a mighty oak. It just had to be in the right environment. And when I heard that, I was like, man, it cannot be this simple. And so then I went back to my religious belief and understanding. But when I broke it down and saw that a oak tree stands for spirituality, strength, all of those things, but it comes from this little bitty acorn. So that was my beginning journey to spirituality.
Well, lest I be misunderstood, I am not anti-religion in the slightest. I'm not a God hater. I'm not a religion hater. In fact, I have the highest regard for the Roman Church that I grew up in. I just don't believe in the deity.
Awesome.
Uh, but I think the religion, organized religion, does a great deal of good. It helps an awful lot of people, millions upon millions, and I approve of it entirely. I just don't happen to believe.
Absolutely. So I heard you also say something about talk show host, and I'm aspiring to be a talk show host, being a podcast hoster myself. Any experience you could share with me to help me along the way?
Well, actually, you're in the right place now. The broadcast radio talk is pretty much dying.
Yeah,
It's only left in like the top 10 markets, and it's dying out there. Everybody's either syndicated or people aren't listening to the radio that much, even in their cars.
yeah,
They listen to podcasts. So you're doing the right thing for today's world.
awesome. Well, today's podcast is everything self-love and recovery. And I've had the pleasure of having Bryan D on from Southeast Florida. Bryan, is there any parting words you could give? Inspiration, encouragement, break it down for us.
Yeah, acceptance.
Acceptance
Accept
is
the
the key.
world as it is and deal with it as it is.
But who do you say? How do you tell the person that's homeless to accept it?
Well, I'll give you a funny story about that. Years ago, many years ago, I was in Central House in Delray Beach, Florida, and I was chairing a candlelight meeting. It was about 10
Hmm.
o'clock at night. Now, as you know, from Florida, it only gets cold about 3 days out of the year, and this was one of
Yes.
those 3 days. It was about 35 outside, and this older black guy, I thought, he's probably younger than I am now, but I thought he was very old.
Uh-huh.
And he came in from outside and he was homeless. In fact, I rather gather he'd been living in one of the cars. There was an automobile salvage yard right next to the clubhouse.
Mm.
And he came in and he was drunk.
Hmm.
No two ways about it. But he came and sat down, and I think he wanted to get out of the cold more than anything else and get a hot cup of coffee. But he'd been around the program. He'd been in and out quite a number of times, we
Hmm.
discovered. And he started piping up during the meeting out of turn, and we just talked to him and tell him, please hold it down, take care, just sit and listen because
Hmm.
you're drunk. And that's what we did. I never thought anything more about it until about 6 months later. I was at an anniversary night,
Mm.
and there was this guy picking up a 6 month chip.
Wow.
Now, did what we did in that meeting have anything to do with it? I have no idea, but it can. And
Mm.
you never know what good you're actually doing.
Absolutely. Well, I do appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us. Everything self-love and recovery came about from me praying, meditating, journaling, getting my butt beat, incomprehensible demoralization situations, coming in here stuck in a porta john at times, stuck in my own mind, diagnosed with schizophrenia, all of these things. But today, with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, individuals like yourself and myself that work the 12 steps and share the message and not the mess has helped a lot of people recover. I think the book says in 2001, the fourth edition, that over 2 million people have recovered from a
Right.
seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, since I do have you here, I do want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
The term I've recovered, I'm a recovered alcoholic. Have you heard that in your opinion? Now, this is opinions. Opinions is like elbows. This is my opinion.
Sure.
Opinions is like elbows. Everybody has too. But if you
Right.
share your experience, strength, and hope on that.
Well, when I introduced myself, I introduced myself as an alcoholic. I am in recovery, but I'm never going to be cured.
Mm,
I'm going to be an alcoholic till they plant my ass.
hmm
And I've heard people say I'm a recovered alcoholic as if it's past tense,
Yes.
and we don't graduate. You don't get a degree in alcoholism and get a degree in the program. I think when people say that, I don't mind it. I just think they're probably a little misinformed.
Yeah.
But we all have this incurable disease that we keep in check one day at a time.
Absolutely. Thus, your opening saying that you've been sober today instead
Right.
of the years that you've been in the program. So I appreciate it. Once again, I'm just excited and appreciate it. And thank you again, Bryan D. from Southeast Florida, for coming in and sharing your experience, strength, and hope with us.
Thank you, Wendell. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.